All right, welcome in. Week 6 is in the books. It's the MMQB podcast with Albert Breer. Video edition, week 2. Again, we're just getting this thing off the ground, so all suggestions are welcome. Feedback, all of that, you can get at me on Twitter. That's at Albert Breer. Go and like my Facebook page. You can actually message me there. That's Albert, at Albert R. Breer. So the way this works, if you weren't watching last week, we're going to give you 5 topics that I'm hot on coming out of the weekend, and then I'm going to answer 5 of your questions, and we're going to be out. Generally, the idea is to get in and out of this in about 25, 30 minutes. So jump right in there. Number 1 from the weekend, and I don't think there's any question what the big football story of the weekend was. And look, I said last week I was a little anthemed out. We will answer a question a little later about that, but the 5 things off the weekend are all going to be football related. My number 1 thing, I think, is the number 1 thing coming out of the football weekend, which is Aaron Rodgers likely gone for the year with a broken collarbone. And this should be a fantastic test of the Packers program. Here's what I mean by that. I think when you have a great quarterback like that, it tends to become a crutch for everything else. And what I've always said is what a great quarterback does, and I'm talking about a transcendent quarterback, not a Joe Flacco or an Eli Manning. I'm talking about a Peyton Manning. I'm talking about a Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Those guys create margin for error for you. Those guys are your margin for error. And so when you take that piece out of the puzzle, kind of get an idea of where everything else stands. We saw it in 2008 with the Patriots. Tom Brady goes down for the year with a torn ACL. Well, Matt Castle steps in. They win 11 games. It was still a drop-off. It was a 5-win drop-off from the year before, but it showed the strength of their program that they were able to go 11-5, having developed a quarterback, a former seventh-round pick who'd never started a game in college, who'd last started a game in high school. They were able to get to 11 wins and be in the playoff hunt until Week 17 when you took Tom Brady out of the equation. Now, on the flip side, the Indianapolis Colts, 2011, going into that year, they won at least 10 games 9 years in a row. There was a string in there of 7 straight 12-win seasons. They were almost always, I believe, 7 times top 4 in offense. You took Peyton Manning out of the equation. You remember, of course, he had the neck surgery, then he had another neck surgery, then he had another neck surgery, then he had another neck surgery. And what happens? Well, they sink to 30th in the league in total offense. They go 2-14. They're in position then to draft Andrew Luck. Bill Polian gets fired. Jim Caldwell gets fired. And they're starting all over again. The bottom line is that when you take that piece out of the puzzle, you get a better picture of the strength of the overall program. And that brings us to the Packers. So how strong is the Packers program? Well, the argument, Colts versus Patriots was, well, the Patriots had Matt Castle and the Colts had Curtis Painter. Well, the truth is, that's part of your program is your backup quarterback. It's developing your backup quarterback. It's the job you've been able to do in getting someone else ready to play at a position when he doesn't have an opportunity to get into games. Brett Hundley's been there for 3 years now. He's a 5th-round pick. He was, like a high-profile quarterback at UCLA. And they've taken the time to develop him. They thought enough of him where he became the primary backup behind Aaron Rodgers. They didn't sign a veteran the last couple of years to give them depth at the position. So this tests how they develop quarterbacks because they've got Aaron Rodgers there. Well, if you look in the Packers' past and you look when Mike Holmgren was there, the job they did developing Matt Hasselbeck and Aaron Brooks and Mark Brunell and Ty Detmer, and then Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre, and Aaron was developed, of course, by Mike McCarthy and for a year, Mike Sherman. They did a great job of developing guys at that position behind Favre. So that's part of your program too. But you also get to see where the rest of the team is. How sustainable is the program if you don't have great quarterback play? How Rodgers-centric have they become? Now, we have a couple pieces of evidence of where that was if we go back into the past. Okay, in 2010, Aaron Rodgers had a concussion. I think it was a game in Detroit. He had to miss a trip to New England. And, yes, the Packers lost that game to the Patriots. But Matt Flynn was fantastic on that night in Foxborough. They lost that game 31-27. And that showed that there was good strength in the program. They wind up winning the Super Bowl that year. 3 years later, 2013, Rodgers breaks his left collarbone. This time it's obviously more serious because it's on his throwing shoulder, but this was his left collarbone. The Packers go 2-4-1 with a combination of Matt Flynn, Scott Tolzien, and Seneca Wallace, so not as good. The bottom line is I think we're going to learn a lot about the Packers in the next few weeks. We're going to learn where Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson are in their careers when they don't have great quarterback play. we're going to see about the depth in that offensive line with all the injuries they've been dealing with there. We're going to see what the defense looks like when they're not playing with a lead. This is going to be a good test of what their program looks like without Aaron Rodgers as part of it. And I think it's going to be, I mean, look, they're not winning the Super Bowl without Aaron Rodgers. Nobody's winning the Super Bowl when their starting quarterback goes down unless you somehow have Tom Brady behind your starter like the Patriots did in 2001. But I think we will get an idea of where the ceiling is for the Packers as Aaron Rodgers moves into his mid-30s. Okay, number 2 for this week, I'm going to go right over there to New England. And I'm going to tell you now that the New England Patriots have an advantage over everyone else in the NFL. I know they didn't look particularly impressive against the Jets at the Meadowlands on Sunday. I know they're only 4-2. I know the defense has serious holes. But the gap between Tom Brady and the rest of the league at quarterback right now, I believe, is significant. And I think there was a couple great examples of it in-game against the Jets, basically illustrating how you cannot give Tom Brady a second chance. He will make you pay if you give him a second chance. 2 examples. Second quarter, Jets are up 14-0. Buster Screen drops an easy interception. Brady threw it right in his hands. I'm sitting there doing my pregame. I'm sitting there with the guys I do pre and post with there in New England. Charlie Weiss, who coached Tom, and Troy Brown, who played with Tom. And we all looked at each other when Buster Screen dropped that interception, and we said, there's no way they're not scoring here. That wound up being one play in a 9-play, 93-yard drive. At the time, they were at their own 40. You knew when the Jets gave Brady that second chance that he was going to go in and score. Okay, example number 2. Just a little later there in the second quarter. Patriots have a chance to go in and tie the game before the half. Drive stalls. Steven Gostkowski misses a long field goal. Jets get the ball back. Jets have an opportunity to capitalize on that. Josh McCown throws an interception to Malcolm Butler. Another example. You gave Tom Brady a second chance. What did he do? Well, he threw one of the best balls you'll ever see to Brandon Cooks down the left sideline. I don't know that there are 5 guys on the planet who could make that throw, who could drop it in the way that he dropped it into Brandon Cooks over his shoulder. Most other quarterbacks in that situation, you'd be lucky to get a field goal. They wind up scoring a touchdown. Suddenly, 14-0, when Buster Screen had that ball in his hands, turns into 14-14. And I don't think there's anyone who thought the Jets were going to win that game at halftime. That's the advantage that Tom Brady gives you. And that's the advantage that Aaron Rodgers gave the Packers. And no other team in the NFL has that sort of advantage with their quarterback. It's a massive difference maker having that. It's rare. And again, it gives you that margin for error. And the Patriots now, with Rodgers going down, have a margin for error that no one else in the NFL does. They've got a lot of issues to work out on defense. I don't think the talent in their front 7 is top half of the league. Their secondary has to play better. They've got to protect Brady better. They can't be taking the amount of hits that he has. But, man, having that margin for error, it's a huge advantage the Patriots have over what it was 30 other teams. Now it's 31 other teams. Okay, number 3. And I think this is, to me, this is one of the most interesting stories over the weekend. And I look at Adrian Peterson and what he has been the last 2 years and what he was going into this week after he was traded to the Arizona Cardinals. And I'll be honest, I was in New Orleans in the spring, and I heard all the players, and I was skeptical about what Peterson had left because he's an older running back, and I listened to what all the players said about how he looked physically and how great it all just, it looked like, he still looked like the same guy. And I started to kind of buy into it a little bit. And then a few weeks into, a couple games in with the Saints, it just looked like he was cooked. And the numbers will tell you exactly that, okay? If you look at 2016 with the Vikings and 2017 with the Saints, you put those years together, right? You see he had 64 carries over those 2 years, that injury, of course, took him out in 2016. So 64 carries for a total of 153 yards. That's well under 3 yards a carry. I thought he was cooked, and what I should have thought a little deeper about was why at this point in his career he needs a fit. Because no one is going to build around a running back in his 30s. No one's going to do it. So what Adrian Peterson had to do was find the right situation. I'm going to take you back to Minnesota, what happened in Minnesota last year. When that offensive staff lost Adrian Peterson for the year, it was almost a relief to them. And that sounds weird because he's an iconic figure in Minnesota. But to those coaches, they felt like it kind of freed them up because they wanted to do some different things offensively, and Peterson restricted them. Peterson's has been over the course of his year, transcended a couple of things, but he's not that versatile. So when the Vikings were putting him out there on the field, it limited what they could do. And the thought was, we can do more with Jerick McKinnon out there because he brings more to the table. I think what Norv Turner and then, later Pat Shurmur, what they wanted to build was an offense that was where Teddy Bridgewater, then Sam Bradford could go out and play point guard. And Peterson restricted them from doing that. And what are the Saints? It's exactly what the Saints are, right? They want Breeze to go out there and play point guard. And what type of backs have they valued? Reggie Bush, Darren Sproles. They drafted Alvin Kamara this year. Even Mark Ingram can catch the ball out of the backfield, even though he's a bigger guy. The fit wasn't there. The same problem he had at the end of Minnesota was the problem that he had in New Orleans. And so he had to find a place that was a fit. And the reason Arizona's a fit, they built that whole operation around David Johnson. That entire operation this year. How are we going to limit hits on Carson Palmer? How do we take the burden off of older players like Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald? How do we highlight a young defense that we're starting to believe in? We build it right through the running game. And we're going to give the ball to David Johnson a lot because we believe that he's one of the best players in football, and because it'll help Carson Palmer, and it'll help Larry Fitzgerald, and it'll help an offensive line that's got some issues, and it'll help the defense because it'll shorten games. And Adrian Peterson can step right in there. And it's amazing if you look at it. He had 27 carries in 4 games in New Orleans, 26 carries in his first game in Arizona, 134 yards in those 26 carries with Arizona, 81 yards in those 27 carries with New Orleans, 2 touchdowns with Arizona, no touchdowns with New Orleans. Fit absolutely matters. And fit mattered a lot there with Adrian Peterson. There was a time where you fit your system to him. Now at his age, he just had to find the right fit. Number 4, we've been really focused on Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown, and now Martavius Bryant asking for a trade, and some of the Steelers' offensive line issues. And I think what maybe we're missing here is the Steelers are evolving, and they've become very offense heavy for a good reason in the last few years, because it's not the way the Steelers were 10 years ago. It's not the way the Steelers were 20 years ago. It's not the way the Steelers won their Super Bowl in 2008 or 2005 or any of those Super Bowls in the 70s. They became very, very offense heavy the last couple of years. And I think what we're seeing now is a team that's evolving and a team that's becoming more well-rounded. And this may be as well-rounded a team as Mike Tomlin's had since he had to tear that defense down. The great defenses, of course, of the past, where you had James Ferrier and Ryan Clark and Troy Polamalu and Ike Taylor and all of those guys, Aaron Smith. It's taken them a long time to come out from underneath that. It's taken them a long time and a lot of draft picks to find the right guys to rebuild. They are now 3rd in the NFL in total defense. They are 4th in points allowed, and that defense absolutely carried the Steelers to a win over the previously undefeated Chiefs. And it was the defense making the big play at the end. Yes, Brown had the touchdown. But James Harrison's sack was as big a play as you saw in the NFL last weekend. And taking Harrison out of the picture, because obviously he's an older player and they've brought him back 15 different times. Look at the age of the guys in their defense. Okay, Cam Hayward is kind of the older part of the core, 28 years old. The rest of them, defensive lineman Stephon Tuitt, 24. Linebacker Ryan Shazier, 25. Linebacker TJ Watt, 23. Corner Artie Burns, 22. Linebacker Bud Dupree, 24. They're young. They should, at least on paper, get better. And when we've seen them get knocked out of the playoffs the last couple of years, I mean, last year, there's no question, they could not stop New England. And now, I think that this is the type of team this is a team that's isn't going to be as exciting, may not be quite as exciting to watch, right? It may not even win as many regular season games, but this is the type of team that's equipped to win in January. And it's not a defense wins championships thing. It's more the teams that have the teams that can beat you the most amount of ways are the teams that are best equipped to win in the postseason. Because when you get to the postseason, you're going to face some good teams that are going to be able to take things away from you. And they're going to be teams that are going to make you play left-handed. And they're going to try to put you in an uncomfortable situation. And if you're not well-rounded, that's going to be a problem. They're way more well-rounded now. There's a reason why Le'Veon Bell got the ball 32 times on Sunday against the Chiefs. Mike Tomlin knew his defense was playing well. And it's what we just said with Arizona. You know your defense is playing well. You start to trust your defense. Let's shorten the game. Let's limit the amount of possessions that our defense has to be out there. Let's make sure this doesn't become a shootout. Because you know, if you have a defense you can trust, if the game goes into a phone booth, that you got a good chance of being the one to come out of it. Okay, number 5, to wrap it up for this week. I would urge you guys to go to the MMQB.com. I pulled all credit to Peter King for coming up with the idea. He said just call a bunch of GMs and personnel directors and ask them for their top 5 college quarterbacks. And so I did that yesterday, sent out a bunch of texts yesterday, and I will give you guys the results of that poll here now. Again, I urge you to go and check it out on the MMQB.com. We got a full story on it. So basically that was it. And the emphasis here for me was I want to see where they're at midseason because a lot of things can change. I had a smart GM over the summer warn me about propping this quarterback class up. And the point he made was a good one. He said, well, Sam Darnold's only got 10 starts, right? That's what he had coming out of 2016. And he looked great, but he only had 10 starts. Josh Rosen has all the off-field issues. He was injured. He was uneven as a sophomore. Josh Allen was very, very raw, which is great because he's got a lot of raw ability. But if you're going to project him to become something that he's not now, then you're going to want to see year-to-year progress. And if that doesn't come, if he's still that raw talent in his third year starting, well, then, maybe you look at him a little bit differently. So anyway, that was the idea was to reset and look at the quarterbacks and say, okay, to these people who are paid to evaluate this stuff, what do you see now after 6 games? I'm going to give you guys the 8 guys who got votes. Number 1, Sam Darnold. Number 2, Josh Rosen. Number 3, Josh Allen. So that's as expected. Number 4, Luke Falk from Washington State. Number 5, Mason Rudolph from Oklahoma State. Number 6, Baker Mayfield from Oklahoma. Number 7, Lamar Jackson from Louisville. And number 8, Ryan Finley from NC State. A couple things I'll leave you guys with here before I get to the questions. First, this isn't over yet. Every guy that I sent this stuff to, because I knew it was coming too, but every guy said, well, it's really early. It's hard to, we still haven't put everything together, but here are my impressions. So that was sort of the caveat with all of this. Darnold and Rosen were closer than I thought, man. I thought Darnold was going to be a runaway number 1. The way I scored it is easy. If you get a first-place vote, that's 5 points. Second, 4. Third, 3. Fourth, 2. Fifth, 1. So the high score would be 40 points. Sam Darnold had 35 points. Josh Rosen had 34. So almost everybody had him right at the top. Sam Darnold had 4 first-place votes. Josh Rosen had 3 first-place votes. Both of them were on all 8 ballots. Clearly the top 2, just as clear. Number 3 was Josh Allen. He was the only other guy to appear on every ballot. And then after that, it seems like it's wide open. Like it's open for any of these guys to jump up and take it. And so the one name I would watch would be Ryan Finley. Not many people had heard of Mitch Trubisky at this time last year, at least people who follow the NFL and don't follow college football as closely. And Ryan Finley's the guy who could wind up coming out of this and looking like wow, like, you know, where did he come from? We weren't talking about him before the year, and then in the middle of the season, like all of a sudden the scouts, the NFL people were starting to pay attention to him. Ryan Finley might be the name to watch there. He's a junior at NC State. Has played really well. He's got the measurables. Big, tall kid with a big arm. So Ryan Finley, there's your name to watch going forward if you follow college football. Okay, so we're going to get into the questions now. Again, this is something I want feedback from you guys on too. Again, on my Twitter page at Albert Breer, on my Facebook page at Albert R. Breer. I want to know if you guys would rather have us do it this way. Maybe we Periscope this thing live, and I could just answer questions live off the Periscope. Whatever you guys think works best, I'm willing to do. We want to make this the best experience, the most interactive experience for you. So for right now, what we're doing is we're answering the questions off of Twitter. I put out the call early this morning, and I'm going to answer 5 that I picked out. Question number 1, and we will give you a shout out, so you will get your name here on the podcast. Number 1, this is from New York Jets Analyzer. That's at Unknown Jets Fan. Was that a touchdown or a touchback? I'll tell you what, I don't know, but that's why it should have been a touchdown. I don't know. I don't think New York knew. I don't think Tony Correnti knew. It has to be indisputable video evidence. Indisputable video evidence. Now, unless they had some sort of angle, and they were vague about that when Al Riveron, the senior VP of officiating, was on the conference call yesterday, they were vague about that. Unless they had some sort of angle that we didn't have, that was not indisputable. I mean, it might have been a fumble, and if they had called it a fumble on the field, I would have said you couldn't overturn that. There just wasn't enough evidence there to overturn it either way, and that's not what replay's there for. Replay's not there to overturn 50-50 calls. Replay's not there to make it. Replay is criminal court. It's not civil court. It's not 5149. That's civil court. Replay is criminal court. Replay is beyond a reasonable doubt. What I saw was not beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 2 from ERJ, that's at Phila Derek. Are the Eagles the best team in the league? 4 straight wins, 3 wins on the road, 5-1 record. I am not surprised by the Eagles' success. Let me come out and say that first. I picked them to win the NFC East. I thought they were a dark horse to get to the Super Bowl. The reason why, and I've pounded this into the ground, the NFL has an offensive line crisis. It has issues developing players up front on both sides of the ball. And so I think the teams that are good in those areas have an advantage over everybody else. The Eagles have one of the 2 or 3 best offensive lines in football, maybe the best offensive line in football when Lane Johnson's in there. And their defensive line was good last year with a chance to be great this year in adding Timmy Jernigan and Derek Barnett and Chris Long to a group that already had Vinnie Curry and Brandon Graham and one of the best defensive players in football in Fletcher Cox. So they had that advantage. I thought a lot of it was going to ride on whether or not Carson Wentz took the next step in his second year as an NFL quarterback. I saw a throw against Carolina that was, I said everything. I think it was 3rd and 17, and pocket collapsed around him. He kind of, a pass rusher got his hand on his ankle, I think. He just kind of tripped. He made this off-balance throw to Matt Collins. And I don't know that everybody noticed what he did in that spot. But to get the ball where he got it, to have the presence of mind in that spot, to know where his receiver was going to be that clutch on 3rd down, just thought it was fantastic. Fantastic. That was one of those throws that got me going, like that Brady throw to Brandon Cooks. Question number 3. Matt Elliott at @ElliottM_3. What does Tyler Eifert's future look like? Not great. Look, tight ends tend to get hurt. We've seen it with Gronkowski. We've seen it with Jordan Reed. Those guys generally have to be you have to be one of the most versatile players in the field because you got to block and catch. Your body takes a beating doing those things because you're blocking one play, you're running through an area inhabited by linebackers on the next play. It's a tough position to stay healthy at. And another example, perfect example, Dennis Pitta. So I love Tyler Eifert as a player, but I am not optimistic about where he's at going forward, because guys who have injuries habitually this way generally don't suddenly become healthy football players. Question number 4, Alex Dale. That's at NFL Nerd UK. This is a question that might be dated by the time we actually put this up, but I'm going to answer it anyway. If you had a seat at the owners' meetings today on the anthem issue, what do you say? I think the important thing here is for them to look at this from a business standpoint. Look, it's sensitive. It's absolutely a sensitive issue, and I think the important thing here is for them to find some sort of end game and find some sort of resolution. That doesn't mean forcing everybody to do anything, but that means finding a way to say to the players, this is not good for our business. We can serve all the causes that you want us to serve. Let's try to do it without burning our business to the ground. That, to me, is the challenge in this. And I don't know what the answer is. I think they're going to have to get creative. I know what Jerry said to the Cowboys last week when he had the players together. He said you can use NFL Network as a platform. He said we're willing to fund programs. We're willing to talk to lawmakers. We're willing to do all of that stuff. But we want to look out for our business. It's challenging. But I think the biggest thing is that I think everybody walking into that room has to look at it like we need some sort of resolution. Because, to be honest, that's what the sponsors and the advertisers want. Like, they weren't concerned, like, coming out of that Trump weekend when they were calling the league office, they weren't concerned about what had just happened so much as they were about what was going to happen and where this was all going to be going forward and what would happen the next time Trump tweeted something stupid. I think the key is finding a resolution. It's challenging, but I think the way to do it is to find ways to serve the players' interests and their causes the best way you possibly can while still protecting the business. Again, that's a challenge. Question number 5 from Brian Wyora. That's at 11 Fitzgerald. Could the Cowboys actually be better with Zeke Elliott? No. Zeke Elliott was starting to play his way into shape. Zeke Elliott is one of the most versatile backs in football because he is a 230-pound, 3-pound back. That is the back of the future. That's what Saquon Barkley is going to be coming out of Penn State next year. So, no, they can't be better without Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott protects them on defense because he is a guy who can grind out tough yards, who can extend drives. He creates better situations for Dak Prescott. Gets Dak Prescott in 2nd and 6. Gets Dak Prescott in 3rd and 2, which is different than being in 3rd and 10. He helps create the attitude and the image of what that team wants to be on offense, big and physical and tough. And he helps make up for he takes some of the weight off of a couple players who are getting a little bit older and can't run quite the way they used to be able to run in Dez Bryant and Jason Witten. So no, I don't think they're better without Zeke Elliott. We'll see how they manage it. I think they're in a better spot to manage this than they were to manage the Tony Romo injury 2 years ago. But they're not better off without Zeke Elliott. Okay, that's it for this week. Appreciate you guys coming out. One more time, feedback welcome on my Twitter page at Albert Breer, on my Facebook page at Albert R. Breer. If you like my page there, then you can actually message me, and we can go back and forth there. We're looking to make this the best interactive experience that you could possibly have coming out of the NFL weekend. We're hoping to get this up on iTunes soon, too. And when we do, and I'm assuming that that's going to happen sometime soon, whenever we get that taken care of, because this is an extension of the Friday podcast, which won't be affected by this, then you'll be able to get us on Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. So hopefully we get that going for you soon. Again, any feedback welcome. Same time next week. We'll see you then.